devices were innovated gradually over time. And so the model that we've been assuming at all times may fail, it may work, we don't know, but we need to be certain, or possible to do in every situation, is to offer therapeutic interventions to those in resource-poor settings. So this is sort of going forward where we need to go to meet the goals of social justice. I'm going to skip over these in the interest of time. Now, what I hope I've shown you is that the scientific and commercial interests, along with the hopes of patients and politicians, need to be considered in light of scientific realities and not merely aspirations. There are a clear set of ethical considerations involved. I didn't go through the derivation of stem cells as much, but as we move towards clinical trials and their therapeutic use, there are going to be a variety of pathways, and we need to be held accountable for those. And we need to explicitly deliberate on those as we go forward. Thank you very much for your attention. So in the interest of keeping things going, I'm going to introduce all three panelists now in the order in which they're going to speak, and then they'll each come up and we will go forward. The first speaker will be Erica Haimes. She's a professor of sociology in the School of Geography, Politics, and Sociology at the University of Newcastle, and is also a professorial fellow in PEALS, which is the Policy, Ethics, and Life Sciences Research Center. She conducts a wide range of social science and ethical and legal research in the life sciences, and recently she's been conducting a large-scale study on the ethical aspects of acquiring eggs and embryos for stem cell research. The next speaker will be Jonathan Moreno. He's the David and Lynn Silfen University Professor of Ethics and Professor of Medical Ethics and History and Sociology of Science at Penn. He holds a courtesy appointment as a Professor of Philosophy. He's also a Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C., where he edits the magazine Science Progress. He was a member of President Barack Obama's transition team for the Department of Health and Human Services. And the last speaker will be Timothy Caulfield. He's been a research director of the Health Law Institute at the University of Alberta since 1993. In 2001, he received a Canada Research Chair in Health Law and Policy. He's also a professor in the Faculty of Law in the School of Public Health. He's a senior health scholar with the Alberta Heritage Foundation for Medical Research, the principal investigator for Genome Canada's project on the regulation of genomic technologies, and the theme leader for the Stem Cell Network, and it's one of the national centers for excellence in Canada. So what you're seeing here is you're going to have a sociologist, social scientist, a philosopher, and a lawyer discussing various aspects of the ethics and social issues moving forward. And it's sort of this interdisciplinary work, these approaches, that are going to shed light on stem cell research as it moves forward to help meet its goals. So please welcome Professor Haimes. Tell me about this part. Hold on.
Somebody did it for you.
Yeah, no, I you just.
Do you want me to start? All right, okay. It's a bit worrying when Jeremy was saying you've got a sociologist, philosopher, and a lawyer. It sounds like the start of a joke, but I don't know what the punchline is. So while Jeremy tries to turn into a technician, great. And how do I change it? That one? Great. Okay, I'll try and make a start on my presentation. Just want to say thanks very much to Bernie Siegel and colleagues for inviting me to present today. We have strict instructions to stay crisp and within our time from Jeremy, so I will finish by 31 minutes. Just to say that my general approach as a sociologist is that my job really is to investigate how the rules, the principles, the theories of whether it's science, ethics, or regulation, actually work out in practice and what the consequences of those practical implementations are. And I'm particularly interested in those areas that are often either neglected or taken for granted. And one of the things I would suggest in terms of stem cell science is that we have tended up to now to take for granted the provision of the embryos and the eggs that we actually depend on for doing the research. So I wanted to look more closely at the role that the tissue providers play. But with the same aim of everybody else in this room, I think, which is to actually create and help create science that's ethically robust, well-regulated, and effective in terms of reaching its therapies. So in terms of what I want to cover, I'll go through those different areas one by one. But I guess the key question for this meeting is whether any insights from the UK actually provide you with a route map or cautionary tales, things to avoid. And I noticed last week that Doug Melton was being very complimentary about how we do things in the UK, and it's nice to know we get some things right. But I think there may be a few cautionary tales that we need to attend to as well. Okay, what I'm going to do then is present material from two ongoing projects. The first is funded by the Wellcome Trust in the UK and looks at the experiences of IVF patients who are asked in the IVF clinic to donate their spare, and I'll look at that word a bit more, fresh embryos for stem cell research. We're now actually publishing from this study. We're just at the final stages of it, and I'm more than happy to go into further detail over the next couple of days if people want to ask questions about this. The other project that I want to talk about today is a new project funded by the Medical Research Council in the UK, the equivalent of NIH, where we're trying to provide a socio-ethical evaluation of a scheme where women who want IVF treatment are asked to volunteer to provide their eggs for somatic cell nuclear transfer research in exchange for a 50% reduction of their fees. So 50% of their eggs for 50% reduction of fees. And you can imagine that that raises a few questions for ethicists. And these two studies are done within a context of a range of other projects that I and my colleagues are conducting in Peels, particularly looking at the donation of tissue for research, and I have a long-standing interest in various socio-ethical aspects of assisted conception. Okay, now as Jeremy has indicated, there's a repertoire, if you like, of systematic questions that were asked about the ethics of stem cell research, and that's been applicable to this area about the provision of tissue as in other areas. Classically, of course, the moral status of the human embryo, and particularly within a context where those embryos are going to be destroyed, or what some might regard as an even worse situation, embryos are being created in order then to destroy them. And in relation to, obviously, somatic cell nuclear transfer research, is this putting us on the slippery slope towards reproductive cloning? Now, those are fairly well-established questions, very serious. They have to be treated with due respect and care. But there are also, particularly in the UK, other questions which are coming onto the public agenda. I've been doing some recent work on the parliamentary debates in the UK for our new bill on human fertilisation and embryology. And the parliamentarians were asking all sorts of questions about what's going on in terms of the outputs of stem cell research. What likelihood is there of particularly embryonic stem cell research to develop successful therapies? Other questions they raised were the distribution of funding between embryonic and adult stem cell research. How effective can we be in deciding how we distribute the funding in terms of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? So again, more recent set of debates coming through. But we can add to these questions when we look at the provision of tissues for stem cell research, and we look at things from the side of the IVF clinic rather than from the side of the stem cell lab, additional questions need to be considered. One question that's been raised by the IVF and infertility community is the appropriateness or otherwise of the use of IVF resources, as they regard them, the eggs and the embryos that may be spare from one person's treatment, that should go to research rather than to the treatment of other IVF patients or infertile patients, particularly when that research as well is regarded as having no direct benefit to the infertility community. Others have wondered whether those who are providing the embryos and the eggs are being exploited. And one question has also been raised about how spare are spare embryos. What becomes defined as a spare embryo? And we'll see how this has been answered in various contexts. So as I say, very important questions. The questions themselves become more complex perhaps as we become more experienced as a scientific community, but they still have to be answered. And of course, one of my interests then is to say, well, those who are actually providing the eggs and the embryos, what do they think about all these issues? Do they actually share the concerns that many theologians and ethicists and philosophers have introduced? Or actually, are they not bothered? Are they quite happy to help science? Are they altruistically motivated? Or indeed, do they raise other, rather different questions from their own experiences?